On today's show, the guys talk about the end of 2017 and all the exciting EdTech happening of the past 12 months. They also take a look forward with their predictions for the coming year, exciting news from the East Initiative update, and more. That's up next on EduTech Guys. EduTech Guys Radio, radio.edutechguys.com.
The opinions expressed under the site and its programs are those of participants and not intended to and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any specific educational entity, sponsor, company, state, or government agency.
Hello and welcome to EduTech Guys Radio. How's it going? This is post-Christmas. I'm David Henderson.
Hey, and I'm Jeff Madlock.
Welcome to the show, and I hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas.
Yeah, and I hope you're going to have a Happy New Year. It's still a few days away here for us. David and I thought we'd do a quick wrap-up show. We're both on vacation, so this is happening over Zoom. So if you hear a little canned air... That's right. And that's just that's the lovely internet connection. David lives in a treehouse in the backwoods, so he's way off the grid. He's running solar panels and that kind of stuff.
That is so not far from the truth.
Let's just put it this way: you'll find me way before you'll find David.
yeah, that's right.
Hey, be sure to.
I'm not off the grid, but I am sure slightly to the left of it.
Slightly to the left of the grid. Hey, be sure to check out the EduTech Guys on the web at www.edutechguys.com. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, all the social media. Heck, just go out to Google, type in EduTech Guys, and you're going to find us. By gosh, by golly, you'll find us for sure.
That's exactly right.
You can tell.
Hey, and listen,
Christmas.
Yeah, that's right. And we love making the show. We love visiting with educators, hearing their stories at events all across the nation. And you can help us continue spreading the love by sponsoring either the show, the conferences appearances, the conference appearances, or both. I'll get it out eventually. Visit the edutechguys.com/sponsors to find out how you can help keep the EduTech Guys train rolling and get your name or company in markets that you may not currently occupy.
Yeah, check it out. We've got some great prices there. Great stuff. You can help us keep our show on the air and live, coming to you from conferences around the nation.
Exactly. Hey, and if you take a look at that stuff and something seems a little off, or you want to work out some other kind of a deal, well, we can reach out to us. We're flexible.
Yeah, call us for
the pricing.
Special
the pricing and packages. Yeah, that's right. Special pricing and packages are flexible. I'm not flexible at all.
I'm not flexible either. Hold on, I've been trying to reach. I've been trying to reach out and pick up a pencil for the last 20 minutes. So
yes, yeah. Over Christmas break, my daughter's over there doing backflips and somersaults and cartwheels, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna roll down the hill.
Yeah, the only time I've done backflips, somersaults, and cartwheels was in a car wreck for the car rolling down a mountain.
There you go.
Or that would be the only way. I shouldn't say that happened to me or anything. So, David, I thought we'd do a quick show today, Wednesday, December the 27th. Just a year-end wrap-up. We're not going to stay on the air long, just enough to let you know that we are still breathing, and we did have we'll make it into the new year. But to take a look back at this last year and maybe look at a few predictions for the next year or what we see happening in EdTech.
I think it'll be cool.
Right off the bat, one of the big deals that has been a big deal in EdTech for some time is social media and its role in education. And I think this year was a banner year for that. I think everything's kind of settled in and solidified and is working itself out pretty well.
Yeah, and I think, it's kind of funny. A few years ago when, we're stepping, almost 10 years ago now, if you're talking Facebook, when social media first started making inroads into education, there was a lot of roadblocks and a lot of people asking questions. Well, what are they going to do with this? What are they going to do with that? How do we block it? I mean, that was the number one question back in the day. And it's really nice to see that over time that has evolved into how do we use this? How do we use it for teachers communicating with their students? How do we use this for reaching out to parents and community members? How do we tell our story out to the world using social media? And so you see a lot of schools, a lot of education based organizations and entities really embracing social media and starting to have fun with it. It went from this big, bad, scary beast to now it's almost like, it's almost like a playmate. You're hanging out, and people are making goofy Instagrams, and you see these principals and these superintendents who are making these hilarious, whether it's Christmas videos or just parent teacher videos or whatever it is, and they're really getting the word out and showcasing the crazy talent that's out there in the district. And then you have, there's a whole slew of teachers who have really made second careers out of building their social media platforms and their followings. And it's amazing. You look at, folks like Dr. Burns and Dave Burgess. He's the Teach Like a Pirate guy. And, we've seen several principals who have come, through social media. And then, we have folks like that are good friends, Ginger Lumen and Kevin Honeycutt. And, not trying to name drop here, but the crux of the conversation is you have this whole slew of people who are taking social media, embracing it, using it heavily, using it more productively, and helping spread their story, spread their message through social media. Heck, that's what we've done the last, especially over the last year.
Well, and we've our social media, we've actually pulled back a lot over the last 4 to 5 months, and we've noticed it. We've noticed what it's done to our brand. Luckily, our brand is still solid enough that we've pushed through and worked fine with it. But you're right. I think that the understanding of how to use it, how it's very applicable to everything in education, has even allowed teachers, they're even more comfortable to allow their students to use it in class and use it in their curriculum to help, excite students and get them engaged. And I think that's the kicker, that with social media and education, it's all about engagement. Good friend of mine, as you've seen, one of the Facebook big guys that come out and said that social media is terrible and Facebook's terrible. And, they're all kind of turning on social media, that it's ruined everything. Well, too much cake is terrible, and too much chicken is terrible, and too much gaming is terrible, and too much lounging is terrible. Everything is terrible in its in the sense of how you're using it. Sure. I think it's interesting the way that you and I use social media. We use it for two main purposes: to keep in touch with our friends and family on basic things about our family, some pictures and things like that. And then we use it heavily for our brand, for EduTechGuys, to get our word out and spread our message. That's pretty much the way that we use it. Our YouTube channel, so your YouTube channel, that's what we use it for, spreading our message. I don't think and I think teachers are realizing that too. And I think that the more you push kids into that, then they're going to understand, there is a good way to use this and a bad way to use this. Right. And if they're using it for the good way, they're just going to continue using it for the good way. Yeah. I agree.
Well, I think it definitely goes back to exactly what you said. Anything that you have to use anything that's available to you in moderation. If you go too cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs over any of it, then it's going to get out of control. It's not going to be used appropriately, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you hit the nail on the head. Anything could be bad if you don't watch what you're doing with it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But it's interesting, and one of the next topics I thought about this last year is less is more, and in that I mean that the way that we're using the cloud, specifically for a large majority of education, is Google. Not to leave out Microsoft and Apple; they have their own versions, and they're doing their thing with iCloud and devices. But I would say Chromebook is now controlling the vast majority market of education. And
it's
a one-stop shop.
Well, and it's really been amazing to watch the complete transformation, I guess is a word. Adoption is a great word, of course, from where we were with iPads. iPads were ubiquitous. Seriously, they were, every classroom we had to have carts and carts of iPads and throw these out, and students are doing awesome things, and they still are doing awesome things with iPads. We're agnostic. We don't care what the device is, as long as the students are using that technology for the betterment of their education, no matter how you cut it. Right. But when you have the inroads of Chromebook. I mean, Chromebook basically went from, the initial, if you look at the very early models of Chromebooks, and, they were pretty much treated like toys. They were, not really accepted. It was kind of like, what are you going to do with these? But, between Google's advancing their own technology and educators pushing for the use of that, I mean, Chromebooks have really taken over at a fraction of the cost of the other devices that, kind of were the go-to thing. And now it's like, what can't I do on a Chromebook? Sure, there are some things you still can't do on a Chromebook, but that number of things is dwindling quickly.
Oh, tremendously. I mean, I'm one of those guys. I remember saying, "Oh, it's just a Chrome browser on a laptop," but come on, whoops. I mean, how much of my day do I spend in Google? Whether it's Google Docs or Sheets or on the web or on a web-based device, I stay on Chrome all day long. So, I mean, that's what I'm using. So you're right. To me, that is the cost-effective, really big push this year, and I think we'll only see it. And I want to say last year on our wrap-up show, I think we pretty much said the same thing. Like, okay, Google's really taking over. Chromebooks are getting, pretty popular, and it's even growing now. I mean, if I can think of how many people I know that's all they carry is a Chromebook at this point, and that's all they need.
Well, and then by extension is not just Chromebook, but that kind of it spills over into something you had mentioned before about the cloud in general. How many services are education entities using now that are cloud-based that were at one point server-based or at least locally installed, and now they're cloud-based? And I mean anything and everything. You're talking from whether it's the time clock that the employees are punching in and out, signing in and out. It's not only electronic, which, that's been the case, but it's no longer server-based on your site. It's being hosted by a third party. Two things that we're familiar with, like you had mentioned, Google Docs and Google Mail and Sheets, and a lot of things are moving to the cloud. I mean, heck, we're even doing, it's even possible to do podcasting and video recording and all that stuff in the cloud. You no longer have to have these massive server farms locally for a lot of the things you do in education.
Yeah. So to me, that's another big one. That one, I thought we'd throw it in there because it's this year has been a really big boom across the educational, providing and making the student engagement easier and more affordable and more available is definitely why. This is one I just threw in there, and I threw it in there because it's still going on, and that's makerspaces. I know I titled this first subtopic as what, when, why, and where. Makerspaces are still viable. I still feel like there's just, even this year, people are kind of reaching to find reasons to use it. And those that use it well know exactly how to use it. And they've adapted it and injected their curriculum with it, and it works perfectly well. But I think for a lot of people, they find a hard time of how would I use a 3D printer? And, that's really interesting because 3D printing has become, I hate to use the word, but commonplace. I mean, pretty much. It's like, who doesn't have a 3D printer at this point? But, I think it's interesting. When inkjet printers came along, every household had to have an inkjet printer, and it became a big deal. Most households still have an inkjet printer because, they print on occasion. But how many households right now have a 3D printer? Not very many.
Not
as comparable to how many Chromebooks were sold to homes this year for Christmas. Well, probably a large amount. How many people still buy printers? Quite a bit. There's still a huge ink aisle at Walmart specifically for ink, and printers. So, I mean, I'm not knocking 3D printing by any means. I can think of 100 applications off the top of my head to use it every day, but we've got to find a better way to inject that into the curriculum and, make it more viable for why a student would use that. Now, in the engineering market and arts and creativity and the areas like that, especially production environments, I can see that. But we don't test on that.
Well, yeah.
I mean, most public education places aren't going to spend a lot of money on something they're not testing on at this point. So
and that's that's a very interesting point in that the spaces where 3D printers are the most prolific are the spaces that are not testing, that are not testable or not being tested.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting point.
Well, and that brings me to the last thing: the onslaught of computer science. Hashtag CS coding. I have to give David his props here. Great tweet out from our account not long ago. And it was taken it was written snarky, but it was actually taken by some of the people that it went to as being yay for us. I found that quite funny. But once the net neutrality thing hit the airwaves after the big vote, David had a good point and mentioned that, hey, great, we're going to start training kids. I'm glad we're doing coding now, because now the kids will be able to code and hack all the problems with the net being blocked. And I thought that was great. But there it is. There's another one. Computer science. We're not testing on it. So
well, and here's the thing. At least from my perspective, at some point we probably will. There probably will be a set of national standards, and then we'll have to test on it. And frankly, that'll be the death of it. I mean, I'm sorry, but the absolute best way to kill the interest in any particular subject or topic is to make it required and test it. How many students used to love reading, and then AR came along? And I'm not knocking AR, okay? I'm not. I can understand its benefits. I see the benefits to a certain extent. But how many students grew to hate reading because now it became A, required, and B, now it's got points associated with it. And, okay, yeah, so sure, you might sort of get into the gaming thing with it, kind of hard to say.
And just so David's talking about accelerated reader when he talks.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm not talking about augmented reality. Yeah, good point. That's a good catch. Good catch. But I was talking about accelerated reader, and I realized long before accelerated reader, because I know there's people out there going, "Oh, dude, reading's been required, in school, since day one," and that's true. And how much of that, just let's go back to just regular required reading text, how much of that has absolutely squashed the desire to read in certain people? I mean, I'll tell you straight up, I at one point was an avid reader, and then I went into my late bachelor's and definitely my master's area studying literature and writing and reading and what have you. And frankly, I got so burned out on it, I don't even know the last time I actually read a book. Now, I will listen to books all day long. Audiobooks, as far as I'm concerned, awesome. I can do that while I'm driving, all that kind of stuff. But if I'm sitting around, hanging around the house, I'm not one to pick up a book anymore. It just doesn't necessarily interest me. And I truly believe that goes to all the required reading. It just made me sick of reading. So I wonder how many other folks now, and I realize there's a complete counter argument to that, in that by getting students to read and forcing them to delve deeper and look into the meaning and that kind of thing, that actually sparks reading interest in folks. So I don't know. I'd be interested in seeing some kind of a study. Shows either way.
I love you talking about that, because that's been on my brain a lot. I was telling you, I've read several books in the last break. But here's what's interesting about all that is that the need for the mass populace to read is not even 2 centuries old.
Yeah.
I mean, the need for the mass populace to read is an American thing that drifted over into other societies as that became the mass media of choice. Now, because not everyone had a phonograph, and not everyone could sit outside in it's a warm summer's eve in Rome and listen to someone tell these stories. Listening to it and think that's how the majority of this was handed down forever. Yes, now they came along and they wrote it and they hid it inside a cave of the Dead Sea. But because we don't want that stuff getting out. But let them find it 1,000 years from now. We don't need them finding it right now. Oh, geez. But think about it. You're exactly right. The need to read, and I'll say this right now, the need to read is devolving, because, like you said, what are we doing right now? We're sharing information via audio, video. Right. I mean, and is it available for everyone? Much more so than books. Much more so than books. I mean, I can find any book online to listen to someone read it for free without having to pay $20 for a paperback copy. Sorry, thinking of coffee, because then I'm going to buy a coffee, and then I'm going to buy some knickknacks and a pencil, and Yeah. I mean, see, I think that we're seeing the de-evolution of reading, and not that it's going to disappear, because it can't disappear. We need it. I mean, that is the hard copy of our history. But is it the hard copy of our history? I mean,
well, think about that, though. Turning this back to computer science and coding, I mean, someone's got to be able to read in order to code. Now, granted, you're not necessarily reading, prose text. A lot of times when we think reading and literacy, that's exactly what we think: poetry and stories and history books.
I wrote a sonnet in Python. Yeah.
There are people that do that. But still, they are going to have to. And in fact, a lot of schools have started the way they approach coding. Teaching programming languages is they teach it as a language. They teach it, here are the different languages we offer: Spanish, French, German, Python, C++. Or C# or whatever the current, code du jour is. So they are teaching it just like it were any other language.
Yeah.
And so I think the need for reading is definitely changing, or what's required reading is changing. It's really weird. Okay, so bear with me on this bizarro track that I'm about to go down. Visible reading. I think I tend to agree with you in that I think that is changing. I don't know if it's devolving, evolving, whatever it is. But at the same time, there is a greater need for the literacy part of the comprehension, the understanding of all of the information we're taking in, regardless of how we take it in, whether it's an audio podcast, whether it's a video we're watching, whether it is something that we're actually tangibly holding in our hand and reading. It's not necessarily the written word that the people that people have to know and understand. It's the comprehension of what the subject matter is, the comprehension of what's going on, the comprehension of the coding that's on the page, the comprehension of whatever that text was about. Like you said, a lot of texts that are required, or not even that are required, just heck, a lot of books in general, you can go online, you can find the audio version, and I can listen to it all day long, and I can walk away with the same understanding that someone who just sits down and reads it for, however long it takes to read that same book. So I don't know. It's very interesting.
That's great. That kind of leads us into that'll take us out of this past year. Let's talk about the 2018 predictions. And I jotted down a couple of topics that I think are very important. And along this same line of the evolvement of competency, of learning, of understanding, of taking in this becomes digital skills. And sure. You talk about we listen to stuff online and we comprehend it as well as someone who reads it. That's kind of a digital skill. I mean, we're moving away from, if I wanted to know about Danny and the dinosaur in 1978, I had to read it, or by the off chance I had a 45 record or a 78 long play that had it on there, I might be able to listen to it and follow along in the book. But now we've come to the point where the digital skills that are involved of living in this world is comprehending and understanding a large topic in 140 characters, I guess now 280 or less. I mean, right. but that's it. That's what's so hard about some of the older generation is, how did you get that from 140 characters? Mm-hmm. What is this? What's the pound sign have to do with anything?
Right, right.
There's a lot of digital skills out there that are going to be needed to live in the world. And by digital skills, that's the understanding of several different types of input devices. And it's not just a mouse and a keyboard anymore. You know, you've got different kinds of screens. You've got emojis. I mean, it's funny. I think if our generation, your and my generation, had to take a test on emojis, I'd fail. I don't know what they all mean. The kids
I have
know.
No idea.
I mean, you know, there's like 7 smiley faces. They're all smiley faces to me. I don't know what they mean. Oh, this smiley face means, and this smiley face means, you know, and I know that's kind of a simplification of digital skills, but that's what we're talking about.
Sure.
The digital, where are we going to push in education to start talking about not just computer science? That, in my opinion, is a next level digital skill. That's like multiplication. It's still a skill you need. But it's multiplication. I'm talking about the addition and subtraction, the basic reading of digital skills that we're making sure every child has. I think we've overused the term digital natives, or, you know, that we've said this, you know, and we think they're just born with it. No, they're not born with it. They pick it up somewhere, and they, just like anything else, you know, the people that are older than me that still type with one finger, you know, I mean, you can pick up that skill wrong, which can hinder you in the future, especially as we talk about the 21st century. You know, I talk to a lot of older people than myself in the business world, and, well, let's take our time. In 6 months, we can do this, and in 2 years, we can do this. In 2 years, you're a decade behind.
Yeah.
Because 2 years ago, when we started this show, we didn't have the technology we have now to do this show.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean,
or definitely not the way we're doing it.
Exactly. And, you know, we had to adapt, and we had to learn new digital skills to get us to this point, to where we're actually, and we both of us could agree, we're still, you know, miles away from where we want to be. But, you know, so I believe digital skills is something that education is going to have to take on and start looking at how to integrate that into the curriculum and make sure that we can make sure these kids are carrying on the skills that they have.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Now, the next one that falls in line with that is digital citizenship. You know, I believe that's a big one to me.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. To me, digital citizenship is the same as, I mean, you know, you could take the word digital out of there. Students have, you know, everyone, we all have to understand, what does it mean to be a citizen in whatever culture we're in, you know, and digitally speaking, you know, people have to be taught what are the rules, when are you allowed to break those rules, what does it mean to be a part of those rules, what happens when you break those rules, what are the consequences, or what should be the consequences, or, you know, what's it mean to be a digital citizen? What does digital citizenship mean? And I think that's one of those things that has been slowly building and evolving and growing. And I love that you've put this down as a 2018 prediction, because I think you're right. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think over the next year, I think that's going to become a huge conversation platform. I mean, especially in light of all of the other things, it's just of life in general that has been going on around what we've seen digitally. I mean, look, me movement, right? And so what does it mean to be a digital citizen within the scope of not me, or Black Lives Matter, or whatever whatever various platforms are out there? Look at net neutrality and its current limbo state. You know, what's it mean to be a digital citizen within the scope of either supporting or defeating net neutrality, depending on where you sit in things? And that in itself is part of digital citizenship. Figure you sit on certain issues.
Right. Well, you know, and that's my youngest daughter started saying lately a lot about, I feel like an ESL student. She said, you know, and it's not just English as a second language, it's Chinese as a second language, or coding as a second language, or, you know, whatever, Pakistani is a second language, or Arabic is a second language, or whatever you want to look at. But that's all falling into this whole digital citizenship thing. And we've always talked about sharing too much. And, you know, what do you share and what do you put out there? That falls into that digital citizenship. We've got to start teaching these kids that, like, you have this ability to record yourself taking a poo, why would you record yourself taking a poop?
Exactly.
I mean, now it happens and people, whatever, but we've got to get to this point of, what's the market? What's the venue? How do because now there's the thing, as a musician, growing up, I had very few places to perform. I could perform at church. I could perform, in a music venue. I could perform on the street. I could perform by myself in my bedroom for myself, and maybe at our house with a few friends. That's changed. It's all changed. I can perform in my bedroom completely alone with a camera streaming to the World Wide Web, which is millions of people. And so, but am I sharing too much? Because I think I'm alone in my room. What's on the walls. And it's funny, I do that a lot. If I Instagram out a picture or something, I always make sure what's on my screen is either visible, not visible, or it's appropriate to be visible. Because the digital citizenship movement is going to get even larger now. We talked to some great ladies last year. I think we'll probably talk to them again at FETSI this year, who have a wonderful book on that. We'll talk about that when we see them. And they're working on digital citizenship. But the next thing I had in there was one of my predictions was coding, but I don't want to talk about coding again. You know how I feel about the coding thing. I mean, it's kind of like, all of a sudden people went, the Model T, well, let's talk about building Ford Model Ts. It's been around forever. Why are you suddenly back on this when a whole, giant, huge group of people are going, you're just now getting to this? Dude, it's how I make my living.
Well, and I just want to throw out my kind of 2 cents on that, and my my take is this, that I think it's very, I don't know, it's funny to me that's become the buzz, right? Oh, we got to teach, all kids need to learn how to code because there's a shortage of coders. Okay, well, there's a shortage of brain surgeons. So does that mean that all students now should be required to take courses that revolve around them understanding how brain surgery works? Now, understand, they're not all going to be brain surgeons. This is not for everybody, but they're going to have skills that are going to translate into something down the road because they've learned how to cut people's heads open and operate on their brains.
Yeah.
Really? Really? I don't know.
I need a good butcher, right? That's it.
Yeah. Hey, Tommy, give me some salami.
I was going to be a brain surgeon, but it didn't work out. So now I was having a discussion with
Tony Stelly. Yeah, forget about it.
I was having a discussion with one of my friends earlier this week about this whole thing. And he's a coder. I mean, that's how he makes his living. And he actually made the statement that, that well is starting to dry up. Those companies are becoming like anything else. When you and I were in school, it was, you got to be a pharmacist. There were no pharmacists, and they're big money in being a pharmacist. Well, then there's a lot of pharmacists, and now pharmacists make what teachers make. So, being a wealthy pharmacist is kind of falling apart now. And we're not going to give you $150,000 to be a pharmacist. We're going to give you $40,000, count 12 pills, put them in a bottle, and shut up, move on down there.
Right.
I think that's what we're probably going to see with coding. I think that there's a shortage of coders. It's kind of boo-ha-ha. If these kids have plenty of time to climb rock walls and play ping pong and, take off 7 days a week while my website goes down for 4 hours, just saying, then, there's not a shortage of coders. But so I put this last one in here because, and we'll wrap this bad boy up, because everybody knows Prince Harry is getting married to the girl from the United States, and that's a big deal. Well, Prince Harry actually does a podcast for BBC4. It's a new one, and one of his first guests was Barack Obama, and one of their topics they focused on their shared interest of building platforms for the next generation of young leaders, and I really like that topic. But I like to take that as, we talk about that all the time. We're training kids for jobs that don't exist yet. We've been saying that for this last year. We've seen that momentum for several years. We've seen it, building up and building up. But now they're realizing that the majority of politicians and leaders in the world are old farts. They just are. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't even find a lot of 40-somethings sitting in large leadership roles. We're talking older people, the kind of people that don't get Twitter, that don't get, Snapchat or Face Chat or Facebook or Face Scroll or whatever. They don't get any of that stuff. But they're making decisions on the next generation in the world based on information of people that we're talking about that watched Howdy Doody as kids. we're talking about a huge generational divide, especially since the 90s and into the new millennia, where time is on a fast track. And I think that's a great place to start talking, and even thinking about, Prince Harry. He's in his mid to late 30s. I mean, he's getting into that age too. That's, we're not talking about the 20-somethings anymore.
Right.
But I think that's my prediction is we've got to see more schools. We have to see the platform of education looking to build platforms for the next generation of young leaders, young entrepreneurs, young artists, young educators. Because I think that's in education, the biggest deal to me is we have to find a new way. We have to find what's different. Is it a handheld? Mario Kart has had a resurgence this Christmas because of the new little handheld thing where you can slide the controllers off the screen. Mario Kart's been around a long time. You and I've played Mario Kart. We love Mario Kart. Everybody, who doesn't love Mario Kart? If you don't love Mario Kart, that's unworldly. What do you think? But they've created a new way to entice a whole new generation to enjoy that game.
Sure.
And to play that game. And it's all based on interoperability. It's all based on sharing and playing with friends around the world, and not just in the same room connected by a cable to the same controller. Not in the same room connected by a wand or a wireless device. We're now playing people, which a lot of us have been doing for decades, playing games, but now it's more interactive. It's literally super real time, super interactive, boom, there it is. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's what's got to happen in education is we've got to build a platform that's going to, for the next generation of young learners and young educators, so that they can go, oh, I can teach kids this way. I can teach kids from this handheld device standing in a field in Norway. I can teach kids to do this. But I think it's also falling into, we've got to start about building. We forgot about building leaders. I think public education doesn't, at least in my opinion of where I am, we don't think about building the next governor or building a mayor.
Oh, no.
Or building a police chief, or building a fire chief, or building someone who's going to run the downtown network, of business owners, or a chamber of commerce, or something like that. I feel like we've stopped building leaders.
Yeah. Well, I would completely, I completely agree with that, in that, education has become, education has always been about churning out factory workers. Mm-hmm. The question is, what is the factory, right? It was quite literally factory workers initially, with, the kind of offshoot of, let's get some folks who aren't going to be the factory workers, but we're going to push them into college, which in itself is another factory. Well, there's been a huge push lately to push all of those students into college. Now, there's been sort of a nod to the other skills, the workforce, as they call it, which is the non-collegiate oriented students. Okay, well, not everybody's going to go to college. We get that. So you guys can go be the factory workers. It's almost a flip, and now we're trying to churn out coders. We're trying to just, we're always trying to churn out people who, essentially, I don't know, it's a lot like, now we're going to go old school, but it's a lot like Pink Floyd. We're just churning out bricks in the wall here. And I think you're exactly right. Fortunately, there are pockets of education, and hopefully this will continue to grow, where there are students, there are courses, there are tracks, there are different things that the students can do that are geared toward those leadership roles. Mm-hmm. You want to be president one day? Okay. How are you going to do that? What does it take? What's it going to look like? You don't want to be president. You want to be a senator. You want to be, like you said, you want to be, you want to be on your local chamber of commerce because you love your hometown, and you want to make sure that it stays growing and prosperous, or maybe your hometown is dying or already dead and you're trying to bring it back. It's going to take leaders to do that. Well, guess what? We're going to give you the tools to show how that comes to be. To me, I think that the education has gotten to the point where we need to say that if the phrase, "this is how we've always done it," is in your vocabulary, then that is the starting point for whatever that is to change it. And sometimes, yes, for the sake of changing it. And I know that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Like, I can't believe we're going to change it just for the sake of changing it. Yeah, you know why? Because sometimes you have to force that change because this is the way we've always done it. That is not a reason to keep doing something, whether it's working or not. And even if it is working, because that's the way you've always done it, change it anyway. Change it up, make it still work, but a different way, because ultimately that's going to open up doors and windows and lights are going to come on that people go, oh, but wait, what if we do this or this and this? And, you know, and all of a sudden there's this growth that's happening.
Right.
I don't know.
I believe that's it. You're right. That's, to me, that is a huge platform for education and for the world. I mean, it's a huge, like I said, we've heard it once, we've heard it 1,000 times. Hey, we're training kids for jobs that don't even exist yet. Okay, then let's start training kids for jobs that exist that we've completely forgotten about, that are going to be jobs for the 21st century, that are going to completely change. You want to talk about digital skills and digital citizenship and coding and 3D printing and anything we want to talk about, that all falls into those jobs of leadership, of, you know, being a good leader means that you're aware of everything that's going on, at least knowledgeable enough to hire the people that know what's going on. That makes a good leader. But
exactly.
So yeah, I think that we went a little longer than we expected to go.
Well, you know, we like to talk.
We do have, which we're going to drop out right now and take a listen to. We do have an East update that we'd like to play for you. This is a great one of a local school in Arkansas that has become a PBS Digital Innovator winner, and that will be on this East Initiative update coming out right now. We'll be right back after the East Initiative update.
Hello, everyone. I'm Spencer Watson with the East Initiative. Welcome to the East Update.
My principal called me and said, I have a job, I need you to come and teach. And she said, it's a class called East.
And you had never heard of it?
Never heard of East.
Farrah McIntyre began this year as the facilitator at Star City High School after having led the middle school program for 2 years. As you just heard, she had no idea what to expect from this education concept called East. Times have changed. This past spring, McIntyre was named the 2017 Learning Media Digital Innovator for Arkansas. The timing was very auspicious.
It was actually the night of our East Conference award ceremony. I got the contact for it, and so it was very exciting for my students to know, you know, that it was them I was talking about, not myself, and that it was all the things that they were doing in the classroom that I wanted to bring, you know, the spotlight to.
Since receiving the honor, McIntyre has traveled to different conferences and summits representing classroom innovation in Arkansas, and to hear her tell it, doing so isn't hard with East behind her.
People add me on social media all the time and ask me about the things that we're doing in my classroom, and I get to tell them this was easy for me to be a digital innovator because of East. You know, all the things that they're looking for in a digital innovator is what East is doing. So I think for me it was very easy just to go in and say, this is not my idea or my model. This is what East is doing.
What East is doing is teaching students to use technology, something that was daunting for McIntyre at first, but also helped her bond with her students.
I told the students that I'm learning with you. I have never done GIS GPS. I have never worked with 3D printers. And so I think that helped them to feel like I was being legitimate with them, and we kind of learned together.
It's a path McIntyre never thought she'd take.
Okay, I never thought I would become a teacher. I'm actually 32, and so at my third year, I started at 29. As soon as I got out of high school, I went into college not knowing what I wanted to do, so I picked business. Ended up getting married. My husband's a pastor, so we moved out of state and was kind of moving all over the place. So I started working at a bank in bookkeeping. Then after I had my children, I decided I would stay home with them, and we moved to a really small town in Hector, which is close to Russellville. and I started driving the school bus there because that was the only job that they had. That's what got me into the school system.
From there, she taught keyboarding and business, drawing on real-world experience working in banking and bookkeeping. Now, she says, she helps change lives.
In a regular keyboarding class, I might say you're going to need keyboarding for every job. Or in a CBA class, I might say, well, you might use Microsoft Word if you're typing up a paper in college. But in East, they get to see, like, this might be something that you use in a real job and, not just typing. But you can take this and turn it into a future.
It's not always easy for the students or the teacher, but McIntyre reminds her students that the education is in the challenge.
I tell them it's like playing a video game at home. If you can't pass a level, you're not going to raise your hand and ask your mom, how do you pass level 5 or whatever. You're going to keep failing until you figure out the secret passage and you pass that level, and that's on your own, and you just keep trying. So that passion comes through without me having to really push that.
McIntyre said she saw that passion in a project her students did working with a local nursing home, making what's called an elopement binder. It contains information about residents that can be shared among staff and with emergency personnel for residents who may accidentally leave the property and get lost.
Probably the most emotionally connected project I've had is the elopement risk binder that my students completed last year. We actually spent time going into parts of the nursing home that is secluded, and those patients didn't remember us from one visit to the next, but my students would build relationships that they would remember. That helps some of them to know that, I want to go into the medical field when I get older because I want to work with patients like this.
It's one thing to teach a class. It's another to have a real community impact, especially for an educator who works in the very same small hometown in which she grew up. That's right, McIntyre is herself a Star City grad.
It's a very small community, so anything that we do brings pride to me because we are such a small town, and everything you do makes the paper, and everybody's proud, and it's she's a hometown girl, and she's making a difference in our students' lives, and my principal calls me a warrior for our kids. So that's what I want to continue to uphold and say, just because you're in a small town doesn't mean you can't do big things.
If you're interested in knowing more about the EAST Initiative, from information on student projects to the professional development services we offer to educators of all kinds, please visit www.eastinitiative.org or just search for EAST Initiative on social media. If you are interested in finding out how to get an EAST classroom in a school near you, please contact eastinfo@eaststaff.org. That's EASTINFO at EASTSTAFF.org. Special thanks to Farrah McIntyre, East Facilitator at Star City High School. The music you've been hearing is called Pulse by Brandon East of Tri-County Tech Center. Again, I'm Spencer Watson, and that's the East Update.
Thank you very much to Spencer and for bringing us the EAST Initiative update. And we enjoy hearing what's going on with the EAST program here in Arkansas and around the nation. And we've got really cool things happening in 2018. Talk about looking ahead. We are going to be in Orlando, Florida in January 23rd through the 26th at the FETSI conference. Looking forward to that one.
Hey, and then we'll be in March. We'll be here in Arkansas at Hot Springs, Arkansas, at the 2018 East Conference. That'll be a really special time.
Man, that'll be cool. And then looking further ahead, later this summer, July 31st through August 1st, we're going to be in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the Flipgrid Live 2018 conference. So that is going to be really cool. Looking forward to that.
I'm excited about that one. That's, Flipgrid is a real big, cool platform, and it's going to be fun to be there podcasting live from their stuff. So remember, if you'd like to sponsor us on any of this and get your name or your company out there and markets that you're not generally at, but you can definitely serve, please get in touch with us, Jeff@EduTechGuys.com or David@EduTechGuys.com, or just go to the web, EduTechGuys.com/sponsor. And you can find out everything you need to know about us and our sponsorship availabilities. Don't forget to ask us if you have special requests. We can make a special pricing and a special package just for you. Help us keep the word out there, because if you can't tell your story, how are you going to help them tell theirs? Hey, David, it's been a great show.
Awesome. Hope as everyone has had a very Merry Christmas. Looking forward to a very happy New Year. And thank you guys so much for tuning in and taking a listen to EduTech Guys Radio.
The next time we'll talk to you will be 2018. Hey, I'm Jeff Madlock.
Hey, I'm David Henderson.
We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to EduTech Guys Radio, radio.edutechguys.com.
The opinions expressed on the site and its programs are those of participants and not intended to and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any specific educational entity, sponsor, company, state, or government agency.